Radio Spaetkauf. Berlin News in English.
Welcome everyone to Radio Spaetkauf. This is episode 3 of season 2 of RSxEAB. This season's topic is saving culture, and this particular episode is titled, What is a Museum and Why? Which we will get into shortly with our guests. I want to welcome our audience here in the studio with me. Very good. They have been, we just spent a dozen minutes training them on that response for listeners at home. I like museums. I don't like museums. I have a lot of questions and mixed feelings about them, and luckily I have 4 amazing guests to help me sort through that. I'm a big fan of small idiosyncratic museums. Like, I love to do that when I travel, find a museum that only exists in that place. So things like the Esperanto Museum in Vienna. Anyone been there? Nope. It's great. It's better. The Postal Museum in Stockholm I thought was overrated. I was disappointed to find out when I visited Budapest that the Museum of Phones was closed for the day, I think due to something Catholic. I realize, though, one of the reasons why I like these small, odd museums is that they give me a context. I know what's there and why, and it's narrower, and the people who are there tend to have expertise or at least interest in the subject. I do love a giant art museum that covers, centuries worth of masterpieces, but having been to one with a friend with an art history degree, and what they allowed me to see in that art kind of ruined it going forward after that. And oftentimes I go to museums and no one with an art history degree is willing to explain it to me. That being said, there isn't a clear definition of what a museum is. Not to be the guy who starts a speech or show with Webster's Dictionary says. But for the context of our discussion, I'm just calling it a place with things that are significant to someone culturally and or historically and or technologically. And we can get into a little bit of that. Growing up, a museum meant to me something that Indiana Jones put things in. His quote was, "This belongs in a museum." In retrospect, looking back at the more anti-colonial attitude, I would have to say maybe it doesn't, or at least not yours, Indiana. But beyond all of my personal things on this, museums are a big part of the experience of travelers and of a city and of seeing it and how it wants to represent itself. And I find that oftentimes as we come to a city like Berlin or Vienna, we sort of walk through it as though it is a museum of museums. Museum Island is something that people visit just to see the exteriors of these buildings. And that's one thing. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, and sometime in the mid-90s went to see a man named Henry Rollins speak. If you know who that is, you are not in this room right now, judging by your faces. But if you're exactly my age and exactly where I'm from, you would know who he is. We saw him speak at the Art Center of UMass Amherst, which was a sort of a brutalist but not well-done building, which he referred to as a fortress of art. Which I think is something we can think of, for me, is what a lot of museums are. I think that's a good place to have me stop talking and get into someone with a little bit more knowledge on that. Our first guest today is a longtime listeners will recognize his voice as returning from an episode from, mid-pandemic, which was either 2 years or 7 years ago. He is an artist who uses sculptural interventions, installations, and performative workshops to question our engagement with media and with public economies and online platforms. His work often confronts us with weighty topics like surveillance, data privacy, and technology dependence. And he does this by bringing the contradictions and absurdities of our everyday digital lives into physical settings. He's exhibited at MoMA Museum Modern Art, New York, the Sculpture Project im Münster, Palais de Tokyo, Hamburger Bahnhof, Seoul Museum of Art, and the Thailand Biennial, and is a professor for art with digital media at Thank you. Oh, those W's, that's 15 years. They still kill me in Hamburg. Please, a very warm welcome for Aram Batholl.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back. I guess your career, a lot of what I see, because I'm in Berlin, is things that happens in galleries and or very unusual places where art doesn't necessarily always happen. For instance, a USB stick in a wall, or artwork curated and held at a internet cafe. Now, when your work goes from being in these types of places to a museum, does it change the way you present it? Does it change the way people interpret it? What does the museum mean to you as an artist?
Yeah, that's a very good question to start. I mean, especially because the way I started my art career was coming from architecture. I studied at the art school UDK here in Berlin. I just started making art projects. I wanted to become an artist, and I put them online on websites. So my first appearance, like public appearance, was like putting works online on the web, and also introducing works in public space. So as already my CV you read so beautifully mentioned this, that I have these objects in public space or perform things in public space over the years. And so the classic white cube museum space or gallery space was something which I wasn't really used to when I started showing there. And I had to learn actually to be in that white cube space. It's not always white, we know. I mean, but just like the
proverbial white.
Yeah, well, that space where we know we go to a museum and there's something on the floor, and there's all these stories of like somebody's cleaning the Fettecke of boys and all these things. But when there's something weird on the floor, this chair could be like a very important piece when it's in that white cube. So it changes our perception of like,
yes,
oh, is this art? Is this not art? Like that whole question.
I love that space of what is art. I mean,
but it particularly puts us in this position. And when you make something on the street, then and like you perform something, then in Berlin, most people, oh yeah, that's another crazy person, or
right.
Also, Berlin, they would say, like, oh, yeah, that's probably art. Well, I don't care. But it poses other questions and engages differently with the audience. Like,
so is what you're saying that when you're in the museum, you know it's art? Or
yeah, that's what, like, I mean, we go, it's like...
Or at least you know it's not,
in a classic sense, like, we go to this temple and then, this is a expensive, glossy building or very old building, lots of money, expensive art, very old art, like hidden behind like multiple layer of glass, etc. So it's like lifted on a pedestal in every sense, and then that does something to us, right? How we look at the works.
As an artist, does that elevation ever take away from the message you're trying to convey, or does it change how you present it?
Yeah, sometimes it's difficult to, especially when it's time-based or performative things, like the what you mentioned before. Like I did the first speed show on Cottbusser Damm here in 2010, which is the idea to go to an internet cafe, which are hardly around anymore, but it's that place where the internet was.
Right, those belong in a museum now.
Yeah, exactly. And I did that too already. So, but back then we the idea was to rent all computers for one night, invite artists to show web-based works like artworks which are on the online or on the internet, and then you just have an opening for one night. So that worked really well. It was an open concept. A lot of people made these speed shows worldwide. And in fact, like the whole concept moved to the Museum der Bildenden Künste for a show like 5 years ago in Leipzig. And I had an internet cafe set up there as a piece.
Right.
But then in that piece was another group show again. So it changes, of course it changes often the way, I mean, for me it's particular maybe when you do paintings, then, you hang the painting in the museum before it hangs in the gallery, like in the front here in the building. Mm-hmm. That's not so much change there, but it's always important to think site-specific, I think,
Let's a round of applause for Aram, please. Our next guest is the founder of one of Berlin's newest museums, having opened its doors in November 2024. It's located right at Cottbusser Tor. It's called the Synthesizer Museum Berlin. It features a collection of over 50 rare and noteworthy synthesizers. The museum also hosts workshops and music events featuring artists like Alan Oldham and Thorsten Quashning of Tangerine Dream. A big, big round of applause for Michael Soltau. Welcome to the show. Okay, so most of the museums I've been to were opened too long ago for me to ask any questions to the person who set them up. So we get to ask you then, like, why and I guess how did you start a museum?
It's very easy, but I've been asking myself that question.
Okay.
No, I've been collecting musical instruments since like 40 years, since I started making music, because my main job actually is I compose film music, and every film music composer has lots of synths he can't do without. So there was, I guess, as I counted, it's over 180 instruments that I collected over the years. And of course, you can't play them all at once, and my studio was too small to host them all. So they spent their lives under the staircase. And that was a sad life.
Oh, it's sort of like Harry Potter.
Exactly.
Okay.
They lived like Harry Potter in cases. And I did maintain them, actually, so they weren't broken or too old or something. You could still play them, and I used them occasionally. But I said to myself, now I'm using modern stuff in the studio, of course, plugins and modern synthesizers. And but these treasure things, these historic instruments, nobody can use them except for me, like once a year or something. So it's the best idea would be to make them available for everybody else who likes to play them and who maybe doesn't have any chance to do so because they're so rare and vintage and expensive, of course. So that was the main idea to build a museum. We actually started before with a Synthesizer Studio Berlin, still existing for the professionals that can rent studio time and record the vintage synths in our studio. But that was only for the pros. But of course, music is for everybody, and so we decided to found or to open up a synthesizer museum, a small one, not a huge palace. Costs too much, of course. And we found this neat little place at Cottbusser Tor, which was formerly a boutique shop for synthesizers, as it happens, because it was Andreas Schneider's Laden. Maybe somebody knows. And he's also the founder of the Super Booth.
Right.
In Köpenick, Wuhlheide. Every year, open air for synth lovers. And so, we rented his rooms, and I'm acquainted. He's my acquaintance since like 10 years. I bought my stuff at his shop as well. And so we used his rooms, and he was happy with it. And that was November last year. And actually, but we opened for the public on February 11. So we are we are newbies in the museum scene.
It's interesting. I mean, a couple of things about your museum. One thing you said that is music is for everyone. I don't think a lot of museums, traditional museums, were founded under the idea that the things within them are for everyone. If it's a museum, it's masters. If it's a historical thing, it's rare. So the idea that this is something that everyone should participate in is, I think, maybe new, but you also allow people to touch and use and hear and see what happens when they play with them, right?
Exactly. We don't have fancy staircases and huge buildings and architecture like the Technik Museum. So our claim is, our thing is, you come in, you pay your ticket, and you can actually play the exhibits. We call it feel, play, and even record vintage instruments of over 50 years.
I mean, that sounds really fun, although also maybe, I'm not sure what would happen if I started playing with a modular synth. It might be physically painful, the noises, I don't know.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the fun, of it.
Oh, that's really wonderful.
No, absolutely. So not everybody is a musician, I see that, but everybody can make a sound with the synthesizer. That's the beauty of it. So and people love it. Not everybody likes to record himself.
Okay.
But it's still, where can you record an exhibit
right.
in a museum?
Right. I mean, I guess that is a big difference as opposed to if it's a violin and you pick it up, it's a very different process.
Absolutely.
From pushing
and we have this museum for musical instruments at Potsdamer Platz. Beautiful place. I love it. But of course, I can't sit at the Beethoven piano and play play a bit. It's not possible. So
maybe depending on who you know. A round of applause again for that guest. We're going to keep clapping every time someone comes up here. Our next guest has a long career in education and communication in the field of film and exhibitions. Her PhD was in film studies and education. She is currently working for the Prussian Palaces and Gardens Foundation on a permanent exhibition titled The Schönhauser Palace in the Nazi Era and the, quote, Degenerate Art Campaign. Please, a warm welcome for Dr. Wenke Wegner.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
That's my pleasure. You're sort of the closest we have to a representative of someone who's, entrenched in an institutional museum setting right now. So I thought rather than present you with any straw men or our own theories about museums, I'd let you maybe talk a little bit about your critiques of museums or what you'd like to do differently.
Okay, starting with critique, because of course I love museums a lot, but still I have to criticize also a lot. And for sure, I'm not talking about the Berlin Synthesizer Museum when I'm addressing critique now, but what I really don't like is museums that I enter and where there's nobody in there, and you ask yourself, why is there nobody in there? But it seems that museums have a big barrier in front of their wall. There's many people that feel excluded, that don't feel welcome, that can't pay the entrance fee, that are afraid that their children might mess up the museum and that they feel that children are not welcome. I don't like museums where the custodians don't want to prepare exhibitions that are open to different interests in the museum, because not everybody goes to a museum, not even to an art museum with the same interest. And I love to imagine museums of the future that address to a wider public, because most of them are publicly funded, and I want them to be aware of that many people contribute to their existence, and so they should also be open to more people.
Is there a danger when you make something, for whatever reason, whether it's because it's publicly funded or just for the morality of it, interesting to everyone, that you lose some of what you might be keeping precious, even though it's no longer interesting? Does that make sense? Like, if we keep things fun and interesting for young people, does that mean sacrificing things that are, inherently boring or difficult to make exciting? I mean, is part of what we do by preserving history or art outside of like the profitable world, like keep things?
I think that even
Does that make sense?
nerds and people who nerds that run museums, like the ones you mentioned before, it's good for them to be open for influence, to be challenged, to explain what they are doing to different people. Yeah, so in a way, I think they should be open to everyone, not even if, and I know it's a utopia because not every museum has to be entered by everyone, but to have this attitude. Right. I think it's important for the future of museums also.
So when a traditional space, there's a DJ all of a sudden on a Friday night, or there's a kids interactive, there's children running around, these things are good?
These things are good, I think. I can mention some of the museums that are doing what you just described. For example, the Stadtpalais Stuttgart is a town museum that is describing itself as a third space. So it's open to teenagers in the afternoon. They can play kicker. They can charge their mobile phones. They get water there for free. So it's a very lively spot. And compared to many museums I know in Berlin, they're just empty. And you see people staring through the window, or the big window of the Paybau, for example, and they don't dare to enter because it doesn't look like an inviting place.
Yeah. I of course know what a third space is because I'm literate. But maybe just for the audience who might not know, what is a third space?
A third place is a space that is not your home and that is not your workplace. It's a place that you can go to without consuming anything, and that you can use freely not totally free, but you can do different things there, and you can even make propositions if you don't find what you would like to do there.
I think the fact that you identify these museums as a potential, or in some cases an actual third space, is really interesting because they're indoors, and because of what they do, they're climate controlled. And I feel like a lot of times that's something that's very missing, because we do have parks, we do have certain streets, we have places. A lot of the third spaces are outdoors, which means that they're not great in extreme weather, in the heat or the cold, even if it is an extreme, and for a lot of people of all ages. But like, how? I mean, is it really as simple as just how do you? I mean, you said you've seen this. It just seems impractical to just be like, okay, now teenagers are allowed in here. Or if you just, how do you get people to start reconceptualizing from the outside, not just the institutions, but to look at a museum and think, oh, I could just hang out?
Yeah, you can start by asking non-visitors of your institution, why are you not visiting this museum? And there is research done, especially in Berlin, by one institution. I think it's the Institute for Teilhabeforschung. They want to know why people don't go to museums, and they find out, of course, it's expensive, or they don't feel comfortable. They don't feel that they just want to look at, they want to touch objects, or they want to be addressed in their different senses, not only by reading text, but also with audio.
I think part of what you're talking about is inclusivity, which can bring us to our next guest. Let's all together welcome a curator and inclusive mediator. She was a lecturer at the European University Viadrina in Frankfurt Oder, and worked with the Education and Outreach Department at the German Historical Museum in Berlin, where her work included the exhibition What is Enlightenment? Questions for the 18th Century, which that exhibit featured inclusive sensory stations and learning materials. She is a native-born Berliner, and it is our pleasure to have here today, please, a very, very warm welcome to Lilja-Ruben.
Don't worry, it's complicated for Germans.
I know, but I made a cheat sheet before the show, and then I left it on my desk, so it's extra embarrassing. I did the work.
No worries.
So I think it's interesting. For me, the topic of inclusivity in museums is fascinating because so often when we're addressing inclusivity, it has to do with people with a wide range of needs, abilities, or how we can better accommodate them. But with museums, because what we're talking about now is a lot of times people sort of self-excluding themselves, it's sort of a different mission when you talk about inclusivity. I want to get into that, but I also want to mention, as you sort of shift back on this uncomfortable area, you're currently on maternity leave, and when you go back into the workforce, I wonder, like, what's your dream job? Like, what do you want to be doing when you go to work in museums again?
Yeah, thank you so much for that visionary question. Since I'm a born and raised Berliner, I live close from here at Panierstraße. So I see Hermannplatz, I see Neukölln every day, and I would love to work in an institution that could be a museum, could be something else, where those really diverse backgrounds, that diversity of people that is not always easy to manage, of course, is more reflected either in the exhibit itself or also in the people that work there, because of course people do museum work. So that's for me would be something that I dream of, and I know that there are so many institutions, especially in Berlin, that are doing the work and trying to change. But of course, a classical, traditional museum is also an institution that is slowly changing in a way. And so sometimes, of course, you have to maybe have a lucky exception where the progress is really sustainable. Sometimes you have different projects where interesting ideas are featured, but maybe there's not enough funding, resources to really maintain that. And for me, inclusion is always connected with an intersectional approach. So I'm not speaking about people with disabilities, for example, but I think also of the social barriers that are behind them, which starts with the entrance fee, but also with how does a museum actually work? Yeah, what are the rules? Are there rules? You know, so that is not something that is easily learned or easily done by everybody. So you have to have, for example, mediators, which I was lucky enough to work as, but still I think it's also a question for the institution of museum, because in a way museums do have definitions, and the International Council has a definition, so and there's always not so much that exhibition part feature, but really that sense of community, creating a sense of belonging and identity. So I think we are, like, as an institution, we also have that kind of responsibility to move in that direction.
That's really kind of an amazing let's clap for all of our guests we just introduced. But I mean, not to be like, well, you blew my mind, but like I've never thought about community participation in the museums in the cities I've lived in. Even I think of the museums as a thing that is separate from that. I mean, there's exceptions, of course. There's museums where I do feel in Berlin like, oh, like they get my vibe, but it certainly feels like. And I think maybe at one time there was a value in having it sort of above and beyond community. I don't know, but how do you get the academics or the bureaucrats to see themselves or see how to change their institutions to make them? And this is a question for anyone on the panel. See that community should be a part of it. That the city should look the same on the streets as within it.
I think. Museums directors, everybody that works there, if you have a museum that is not really full with visitors, you know, of course you have to ask yourself questions. How do I raise more awareness for my museum, for my exhibits? What's the problem? What's hindering people actually coming into my institution? So this is just the job of someone working in a specific position in a museum. That's first of all your daily business in a way, but also with ideas of inclusion and also outreach, which is maybe sometimes like switched together or used maybe like in a parallel way. It's just inviting the society, the community in which your museum actually takes place, like takes a space also in the city, to invite them and to give their perspective. And that needs to be an open invitation where maybe the aim is not yet fully fleshed out. Yeah, that can be something very simple, like inviting the school next door that has never been there, or working with people who are new in Berlin, for example, learning the language. So there's so many possibilities for that. But I think this is changing slowly, but it is changing. But on the other hand, of course, we have now the problem that with the budget cuts in culture, that so many interesting ideas are not fully funded. So that's not sustainable in the long run. So I think we're in a really interesting transition period, and I feel like now with 8 months of maternal leave, I'm already out of the loop because so much is happening, so many interesting spots, but also, of course, problems, and this is also a political question.
Sure. I think, an intervention like getting children into the museum doesn't sound particularly expensive to me, but maybe I don't fully grasp that. But this idea of funding and profit and all of these things are also very confusing when it comes to museums, because while they often are nonprofits, that has more to do with a tax status, and are oftentimes very profitable and bring in tourist revenue and bring people to the cities, regardless of whether or not that's, and this is different in different countries, a nonprofit that's profitable or not. So in terms of like the cost of doing these things, and this is again for the whole panel, like what are interventions that can make things that are low cost that can get people into museums, or what are ways we can think about that?
Maybe I can answer. You can think about ways of moving the museum to different places. So get away from the actual building. You have to think about mobile museums. They exist in Germany.
Oh.
They exist in France. They have I think it's called even MUMO, and it's a museum that carries the national art collection to all over France and also to foreign countries.
So wait, this isn't just like moving the exhibit to an empty space or to another space. This is like a physical.
That's like a physical
like
van
a museum on wheels.
Moving
it's a van
around
full of art.
and
Okay.
arriving in cities where they don't have a museum, for example, and where all of a sudden this van, this mobile museum, is visited by a lot more people, and artwork that is often in the depot, in the stock, and not seen by anyone, is seen by people that have maybe never been to the National Museum.
And then once you get them into the van, you close the doors and bring them to the museum, and now you've filled it up. No.
You can also count them on your mobile tour.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that takes advantage of this, 95% of these collections that are behind closed doors in some warehouse or whatever. That's really remarkable. And is that something? Is there pushback? I mean, again, this seems like a great simple way to bring culture to people.
It's
a
way
resistance?
that has existed before, because we all know, probably if we haven't grown up in Berlin, but in more province places, we know, for example, mobile libraries, and you just had to turn that idea to other places.
I also have a nice example. It's the other way around. I had a solo show at the Kunsthalle Osnabrück a couple years ago. It was a lot about e-waste and discarded electronics. We had this church space, which is the Kunsthalle, filled with trash, etc. And one part of the show was the DHL parcel station, which was actually working from DHL. So, and the museum had free entrance for the period of the show, and people would come and pick up their parcel, and just following the app, I have to go here and I have to go inside. And, it's there, and then they're in the show, seeing the exhibition, and of course also in that vision of the artist and the curators, it's and then they discover the exhibition and they're part of the museum, but
then they're also maybe part of the art.
What's this? Oh, I have to go.
So it didn't work.
Well, it worked in that way that people would really come and be in there, but and also for me, the DHL station becomes like a sculpture, and it's like a performance in the show, so. And then you had these different crates of discarded phones and routers and computers, and for me it was this idea you buy some new tech from some shipping company, and then you can also just throw it right away in the trash again. So you have this whole consumption cycle in the same space. But sometimes, I mean, and the other thing I was thinking about was really very obvious the past couple of years in Berlin. All the big museums make parties now in summer. And you already rolling with the eyes. But it's a bit, it makes sense. It brings in the people, but then Hamburger Bahnhof has it now. Then Nationalgalerie also does all this sound art on the balcony, and it feels like they're in competition and who has the bigger DJ, and it makes sense, but also it becomes a bit funny. While at the same time, there were good shows at Berghain in between.
So there's art shows.
Yeah,
Berghain turned into museum. Museums turned into Berghain.
And also I good friends running a gallery, and this is not museums anymore, but community run or project spaces. There are a lot of them in Berlin, in a club, and Panke Gallery is in a club in Wedding. So it's interesting how the museums become the party thing, and then the shows are in clubs.
It's also, to me, speaks a little bit to trying to make the museum culture fit the culture of the city, because people are coming to Berlin, whether to move here or as tourists, with a certain sense of what the culture is, and that they might even go to a club so that they've been to Berlin as opposed to for the music. And it's interesting, in terms of the identity of Berlin as a music city. The synthesizer plays a pretty big role. It's almost sort of odd that there wasn't already a synthesizer museum.
Actually, it was so obvious but the most obvious things are sometimes not done or not done properly. And since the last big music shop in Berlin closed its doors, like last year, Just Music, there was actually no place where you could play the stuff. I mean, in Schneider's Laden, of course, in Musik Bading here in Neukölln. It's still possible.
Yeah, but that's like you have to be cool already to go in there.
You have to be really cool, right? And you have to know your way with modular synthesizers, which is a special kind of synthesizers.
I've looked through. I've never been inside. I just looked through the windows. Like, oh, if only I understood.
Yeah, you have to go. They have good coffee as well.
Oh, so. Okay. But let's stick to plugging your museum.
Thank you. And we are collaborators actually, but we only have instruments that you can't buy anymore. But also instruments that you can't play anymore, of course, obviously. And Berlin, as the melting pot of musical genres and the musical capital next to Hamburg and Munich, but really Berlin is the music capital, right? So it was obvious.
Maybe not the corporate headquarters, but
yeah. Exactly. It was kind of fitting there. I mean, we could have opened it in Hamburg because I traveled a lot to Hamburg, but it didn't feel right, and we have this spot there, and also we started actually with the idea. We went to town with the idea to establish a cafe in the museum, not a museum cafe, but a cafe where the community can meet,
right?
Where you can exchange your stuff, because actually,
as a third space, so you don't have to buy the coffee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you can donate.
But
this was an idea even to put it one step further. We wanted to, we are going to have a club membership thing going on, where you can come more often and don't pay so much. And we have a kids corner, so this is very nice. And people love to come more often because you can spend hours with the synthesizer. Of course, it's a big machine, much to explore, and people love to come more often. So this is why the idea of a club membership thing is growing. And of course, there's a message. We are in the hotspot of electronic music with the Berlin School of Electronic Music, with the artists with techno and the dance scene, and with the Berghain and all the clubs. Many clubs are closing, so this is a good way to keep it up with the music stuff, with the electronic music.
And you can get in.
You can, yes, exactly. But actually, we also had the idea to make a synthesizer museum on tour. So we spoke to the owner of Berghain already, actually, and then maybe we can have an exhibition there for a couple of weeks. Or go to other music venues.
Put it in a van and bring it out to the countryside or to the schools. Yeah. I'm curious about this idea of the cafe, because there's also something like in traditional museums, you do have the cafe, you do have the store, the shop, or the bookstore. And one thing that fascinates me when you visit is it's sort of the only space where someone's kind of nice to you, and or at least that they're going to smile and say, "Can I help you?" Which it's not the security guard's job to do that. But I do wonder when you're considering museum spaces, besides luring people in to get their Amazon packages, if there's other ways to think just about the one-on-one personal connections that you can create there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel for the matter of inclusion, this is of the utmost importance, because in a way, when I was working, for example, with a school class with my colleagues from Potsdam who are using sign language as a mode of communication, they didn't... some of them were never in the museum before, so of course they were excited. And also simple things. How does a wardrobe work? What do I do there? If someone asks me something, am I timid? Am I answering? So you can see there's so many invisible barriers, and even if you work in the field for decades, it's always changing. There's new ones coming up, others are maybe going down. And for example, a cafe is something also, do I have to consume something? Yeah?
Right.
Can I get the entrance fee somehow? For example, we had the beautiful Museum Sunday in Berlin, where many of the big institutions were also participating. but due to the budget cuts of the funding, it's no longer existing. And it was a beautiful possibility to people just to go in and out in a museum, do not feel obliged also, because sometimes I feel people are paying for the first time maybe for a museum and they feel they have to do everything at once.
Right.
And it's so overwhelming. And Wenke and I worked as tour guides also in the museum, and I feel also, especially with inclusion, it's always good to have offers in exhibitions where people are free to roam and free to discover for themselves, to touch something, to smell something, to hear something. But of course, and I would include myself, I learn best, or if I want to learn something, I love that there's a human being in front of me talking about something and giving it more of a personal feeling. So I think that is also a way of education and mediation, because when you are working in an institution where maybe the creative field is not as natural for the institution, then of course you also have to share that knowledge or transmit that knowledge somehow. And how do you do it? And how do you do it inclusively? That means also maybe giving space for perspectives that are underrepresented in the exhibitions themselves, but also hiring people to explain, because I also sometimes I have the problem when I go to an art space or a gallery, I have art, I think, and then I have maybe one small text, and I'm not sure if I get it, you know?
Right.
So it's always good to have someone there that invites you and explains something about the exhibit, but also maybe about the institution. So because people are immensely curious, and that's over all generations. So, and I feel that's something that is sometimes underestimated, that people are curious. They want to see what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting because so many times when we see like what's going to get people in, and it's not a human element. It's like another touch screen or something like that. In terms of, again, for the whole panel, like, where do you see the role of sort of human people in museums versus technology or digital interventions or other things? And like, is there a different value in both of these? Are they mutually exclusive?
I mean, obviously the big competition for museums is all the online platforms, TikTok, social media, but also even before, like the web. I mean, I think when movies started, cinema, TV, it's like this whole like entertainment culture is in so many spaces today. And then like the classic museum then kind of had to, that's why I'm not even a museum person, but I know that this discussion been going on. We have to reinvent ourselves and and have to be online. And I'm like, I love this whole thing, having encounters in space. I do workshops. You need to meet people, discuss a project, like, or they make something at the table, a project which is part of the artwork then. And you can learn a lot online, you see a lot online when you think about like technical museum or when museum as education space. But the direct contact, I think, is super important. And I have to think, when I was in Skulpturprojekte in these meetings, they were telling like, the mayor came and said, what's your social media strategy? And it is so funny because they were like not interested to have a social media strategy. It's like sculpture in public, right? Right. And but those mayors were like being told 10 years long, like, you need a social media strategy for your city and for this and that. And now, like, we need like an exit strategy for like social media, right? Because it's like it's a problem now with the three big companies, which like.
I mean, if you don't take a selfie, did it happen?
Yeah. In art, it's very. I mean, especially Instagram is like super big in art, and I'm on there a lot, and it's very convenient to see many places and shows at the same time, and this whole like role playing which takes place there. Also, everybody knows it's fake, but
what?
Well, no, I mean it's like a staged. It's a staged space. Sure. It's a performance, and
I mean, so is a museum, I think.
There's all different artifices. Museum is a frame, and it can be more. But it's a physical space. It's expensive to run, and like all these other implications. I mean,
right?
Yeah.
Wenke, yeah. I mean, what's something where like a digital intervention kind of does work or does add beyond?
Yeah, I would also say physical space and real people at museums are really important. But it's true that I could name some examples where technology in museums made sense for me. For example, in historical museums, some of them are dealing with the question of how the Holocaust education in the future can be done. And I've been working on one project where we had the possibility to meet or meet not. It's that's the question afterwards. At least you sat in front of a Holocaust survivor that was telling his or her story, and that was very different from looking at. Yeah, you had.
It was a virtual reality, right?
Yeah,
so
it was with VR goggles or glasses. I don't know how you say it. You had the impression of really sitting in front of this old person, Ruth Winkelmann, Kurt Hillmann, or other survivors that were telling their story, and it was a try to move this. Meeting Holocaust survivors telling their story to the future, because in a few years there won't be any survivors that will be in the constitution of talking to people, meeting scholars, and that was a thing that really worked well.
It's interesting because it seems like very different from watching that on a screen. That to have that immersive, because you can't really turn away. You
can't look on your phone.
Right.
You're really into this, very intimate space with this person. And it was, but also for that, it was important after that to have real people there that were talking about that experience with this pupils, the students.
You mean to help people
that came.
Process it, or?
Yeah, and to talk about it also, maybe also to criticize it. If it's a good way or if it's not a good way to keep this, to do Holocaust education, or if you, rather prefer to read text or to just hear an audio, do you need all this expensive technology? For that, people at the place were important.
Right, and this what was the name of this project?
It's the In Echt project that was done by the Brandenburgische Gesellschaft für Kultur und Geschichte, the Potsdam Museum.
And so was this something where you had to visit in order to experience this, or is this something that moved from place to place? Because it seems like a VR goggles.
The both existed, but it started out also as a mobile exhibition touring with a van and a tent through Brandenburg cities like Wittstock, Dosse, Küritz, Finsterwalde, and all these very finster places.
We're quickly running out of time, unfortunately, so I want to ask a more sort of broad question that I started with, which is, and feel free to jump in on any of these. We'll skip what is a museum, but I do want to talk to all of your opinions on why, and to some extent, how and where and when, because that comes up inevitably. So from your perspectives, whoever wants to jump in here, like, why are we doing this? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I was doing my homework, and I looked at the website of the Deutscher Museumsverband, German Museum Association, and they had there's a guideline. A museum is something where is a place where there is a collection, so you collect for the museum, you maintain the exhibits, you explore the exhibits, you display and explore.
Right.
So, and I think this last point, of course, you call the first three are obvious, but the last one is for me very interesting, that people can do something in the museum, not just watch, not like in the Louvre, just watch from 5 meters apart, but touch and feel and do something special with the stuff. Because I can see art pieces on Instagram and everywhere. But the museum has to go beyond this, has to go one step further. So
well, then let's ask this question. Are the real things different? If you see a replica of Nefertiti's bust, is it different than seeing Nefertiti's bust? If you see a photo of something in the Louvre, I don't know if they have any famous paintings there, is it different than seeing it in real life? I do know what the Mona Lisa is. Yeah.
Yeah, for me as a cultural historian, I have to say yes, it's a difference. Because of course, when I work with these objects, it allows me to give the space also to present some other form of storytelling, because history in a way is also related to storytelling. So if I can work with an object from the 18th century, for example, and you can see the relevance of the object, for example, vaccination needles. Yeah, we had a huge debate about vaccination not so long ago. We had the same thing going on in the 18th century, and that is something like a small detail maybe, but where this separation of history and contemporary is not as existent anymore. And also, of course, when it comes to the digital age, museums also have are obliged also in a way to present their collections, also to present their collections online, which is sometimes more accessible to people, but also allows me, for example, when I'm a scholar or a researcher, to really dive into the archives, into the depots, and really see what is there. Yeah. So right. I feel that this is of the utmost importance, especially when we are now in a time period where different narratives are coming up now, and we also have artifacts of the past to reference or counter those narratives. And so I think that is really really of the utmost importance right now, and that is in a way something for everyone in this society.
It's interesting that these digital collections allow you further exploration in that concept, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the thing, but that that's based on a thing. That's an interesting thing that maybe a lot of people don't know that they could access. Aram?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like you have these artifacts. I was just thinking also in that discussion of post-truth society. Well, like some people say, we're going into this right now. We need to be very precise again, and it's not just artifacts, but it's proof for something. For like you can actually look at it. I was thinking on this. I mean, the discussion of museums need to digitize everything. This has been going on. On one hand, I know I have friends who do like archiving of net art, of digital art from the 90s. They would never get the funding from the Berliner Senat because you're not digitizing something from analog to digital, but it is already digital. So it's kind of a funny moment. And I would like to point out the internetarchive.org, which is like also, I think, like a very important project. Like it's not a museum, it's a website, but they collect like online culture like since many years. And I think it's going to be these sort of places like and it's similar. Like you can dig deep in there and find stuff, and it's this other form of culture. Like it starts with computer games. Maybe there's also from computer games to all kinds of medias. They have a huge collection,
and digital media is very fragile. Yeah. Right. And there's things that we're built for an internet that no longer exists. So I think it is interesting to archive from digital to digital.
Yeah. It's a paradox. Like on one hand, like that one photo, like Trump will never get rid of whatever information is out on the internet. So when it's out, it's like hard to kill. But when we upload something somewhere on a small website, it's going to be gone like in a few years. Like it's really, so it's in between indestructible and at the same time very fragile. Yeah.
Well, that's very fascinating. I think it's everybody says the real deal, the real physical things, they last a lifetime or eternity. But for me, it's the opposite. As you said, you can't kill the digital data. It is always transferred to the next storage system, and the cloud service. They tell exactly this this story. So you, when I still have my files from 30 years ago. They are not. I can't get rid of them. So it's
well, you've done a better job than I think a lot of us. I have some things on digital devices I no longer know how to read or even what they're called.
Okay, that's the problem. No, I always upgraded to the next level of
you
memory.
need to take care of it.
Yeah, you're good at that.
Yeah.
I don't even know the English word for it, but I think it's the Prussian Palace and Garden Foundation that I'm working for.
Yeah,
in
you can
English.
say the German title of it. It sounds better in German.
Stiftung Preußische Schlösser und Gärten is maybe a very big institution trying to preserve historical monuments, architecture, and gardens, and they have this big problem not to have digital data that can be easily transferred to one server and into a new format, but that really has to be rebuilt and restored each time. And I think this project that I'm working on right now, it's in the Schloss Schönhausen, so the Palace of Schönhausen in Berlin-Pankow. It's a palace that is known for many of the Berliners for the GDR history, because it used to be the palace of the Eastern German government of Wilhelm Pieck. He was actually working there, and then it was the guest house. And there's a permanent exhibition about that time. And of course, there's an exhibition about the Prussian time when it was the palace of Elisabeth Christine. But now we are opening a new exhibition talking about the function, the role that this palace has played for the Aktion Entartete Kunst, so I think you said campaign Degenerate Art, where the artwork that was confiscated by the Nazis from public museums all over the German Reich was to be, you probably know that it was displayed in big exhibitions, but it was also sold by art traders. And what I wanted to say is this real place, this palace in the heart of Pankow, is telling a lot about different times, and you can actually go there, and I think it's very impressive, and it couldn't be done on the internet in that way. It's really cool to be there and to stand in this one room and to imagine, okay,
it has all the lives that have
it has had very different lives, and this room has served to very different purposes.
Some of the, I do love the chance to walk around and experience a place. In Vienna, there's the Freud Museum, where it's just his office and like photos of they don't even have much of the furniture left, but you get a sense like, oh, this was a person in a place and I'm in it now. Or there's a museum here in Berlin to the Stasi, where it's just sort of these mundane offices. And this isn't the Espionage Museum that recently closed. This is what was full of VR and weird stuff. This is just desks and microphones, and you're like, that sense of it is really impressive. And I think that goes for a lot of these physical spaces, but some of them are just sort of like, this is big and old, and maybe at some point, it doesn't serve that purpose anymore once it's been one thing for so long, and you have these giant steps and these lions guarding it, and then you do see them as barriers. But on the flip side of that, there is a chance to sort of be the next step in their evolution. Like if it has been a palace, has been a Nazi headquarters, now it can also be a place for teenagers to get water and charge their phones and take selfies. And I think if you're open to that you get to sort of add to that, I don't know, another layer to that, I suppose. I want another question for Aram. One of the things we see now is, as people are digitizing things or bringing the digital in, does that then change, do they know how to use it? Do museums, are they ready to bring in? Oftentimes I see sort of like, it feels like an intrusion. It doesn't feel like it belongs there. When you take an old place and all of a sudden it's like, where does the touch screen fit? Where does the screen, how do you do digital art in a sanctified realm?
Yeah, I think of course there's many good examples in the Technical Museum or Naturkunde in the Nature Science Museum. They have these like interactive pieces to engage with. And then in visual art, fine art, it always like to put a TV in a show, they did stuff like hiding it behind the wall. Like there was always like this awkward, how should we deal with it question. And the Berlin Biennale now, I saw a lot of these old TV cubes again, like CTR tubes, where, maybe the work is old and it needs to be shown on there, but they had so many, it was obvious this is probably something they just had in stock, like and used them. So sometimes it's funny how which technology they use and how they use it. But then since the past, 15 years, TVs became sculptures, and technology is like an art, like in any like visual, like current art, it's like everywhere. So it became like a normal thing.
Oh, there are so many things you can do, I guess, with digital, but maybe it's a thing of the future. What I love to see is like a holographic display. Like when I see the T-Rex in the Naturkunde Museum, I would love to have a holographic display emerging to show how the T-Rex looked when he was alive. So
to add the skin or something.
To add the skin. It is done in a way, but only in a little box where there's a 3D projector or something. But to see it displayed on the actual thing, that would be great.
Tristan
and
comes
also
to life.
with all deteriorated architecture, it would be great. Maybe it's already possible. We saw it at the Festival of Lights last year, where they could display how the front of the house really looked like when it was built.
Yeah, I think so many people are also open to those kind of ideas. It's also related to the institution which I'm working on. Is a temporary exhibition? How many resources do I have? There's so many great museums in Berlin where, for example, education is consisted of one person that does kind of everything. So in a way, if the resources are limited, there are also limits to those creative processes. But in a way, I feel there have been exhibitions where the digital and the analog space sort of were well connected. And I feel that is something that needs to be explored further. But we also have to be honest about which kind of a museum are we talking about. Are we talking about a local museum where, for example, one person is doing everything? Are we talking about one of the bigger institutions where, of course, you have also different departments working on that, because that is all, and creating an exhibition is always teamwork. Creating something inclusive needs to be teamwork always, because there are so many people with special knowledge, for example, about a historical object, how to present it. Is there maybe a doublet in the depot that we can use where people can actually touch it to have that sense of material also? So I feel there is not so much lacking like a passion for it from people who work in museums, but it's always also a quite tight frame where to work it, from time, money, resources. So I'm always pledging for being patient with the people who work in the museum, but of course the museum needs to move more in this direction, because otherwise we also lose, in a way, the next generations of museum visitors. And I feel there's no better way to wake up an 8th grade school class at 9 o'clock in the morning when I have an object that can actually explore, play with it, maybe digitally, maybe a replica. Yeah, that is something that will stick with them maybe after the visit. So that's where museum gets alive in a way.
Yeah. I also like the nerds in museums to be working together, because there's people that really know a lot about what they are doing, and they maybe have been filling a database for the past 10 years with something that will never get to the public unless some educator says we can make a media station out of this database and present visually what you filled into this database for the last 10 years. We can for example, show this collection of historical rings that consists of 3,000 rings of everywhere in the world, of every material thinkable, of every color thinkable, and we can maybe make a media station where visitors can put or visualize these huge collections in different categories. For example, show me every ring that is blue, or show me every ring coming from this African country, and by that making all this hidden stuff more accessible.
We have to come to an end here. I want to keep going with all of this, but one of the things that strikes me in this conversation is the sort of need to get the young people in, to go to them, to bring them, and I think that's wonderful. And it also, to me, is very interesting that the monoliths of museums, like many of our concepts of them, are hundreds of years old. I mean, or thousands. I mean, the earliest museum, evidence of museums we have is like leftover plaques explaining, 500 years, before BC. Explaining how old the stuff in this museum was, So we've been looking at things because they're old for a long, long time, as long as we've been having them. And I think there's also moments in history where libraries and museums were closer related. And it feels like a lot of the Synthesizer museums feels a lot like a library. A lot of these interactive, bring people in, let them use the things, let them be a part of it. Sharing, to me, is something that is really important going forward, especially when it's resources, especially when it's things that you have too much of. You've got museums that just have too much. They have so much art they can't show it all, and yet it's hidden somewhere. And if I go to my local library, I can take art off the shelf and bring it home. I mean, that may not be viable with a Warhol, but maybe it is. I don't know. The point is, this idea of community, I think, can be fostered by certain types of interactions, as opposed to passively being like, hey, if you want to look at our stuff, you're allowed to. To me, isn't really a community thing. And libraries and the way they're treating new technologies feels to be moving faster than museums, but maybe that's just because I like libraries. I don't know. I want to go through each of you and give you one last chance to say something on the topic, or plug, or let people know where they can learn more. Maybe we'll start with the Synthesizer Museum, because I think drop in the website, and we'll put that in the notes as well.
Of course, we love people to come to our museum, and we need visitors, of course. But I wanted to mention that we also have regular concerts. One is coming up with Chris Imler, and there are more to come. Thorsten Questioning of Tangerine Dream will play at on our stage again, and this is a special stage. It's very small. It's like we call it living room concerts, and it's also you get the opportunity to talk to the artist afterwards. I'm doing a little interview normally after the show, like with us, like here.
Yeah. That's a good point. Museums need more podcasts.
Exactly. That's it.
That's the solution.
And as a fun fact, actually that happened to us. There are players coming to us and saying, I've got this old Oberheim keyboard in my basement. Do you want to have it? Can I put it here on display? I won't charge for it. Just it is warm and dry here, and it's okay. So this is a community aspect that was new to me. It's great. It's happening very often, actually.
Right. You set up a trusted environment for people to bring things that would otherwise be decaying. That's very cool.
So have a look at our website at synthesizermuseum.info. And see what's coming up, what gig is coming up. Maybe it's interesting. Thank you.
Nice. Let's continue down the line.
I would just invite you all, if you visit an exhibition place, a museum, have a look out for inclusive materials, because they are maybe a bit hidden for you, but just be open to have a different kind of museum experience. Or maybe ask for it also. Are there, for example, videos in sign language? So many museums now have open tour guides who are doing sign language with translation, that are offering guided tours for blind people, visually impaired, but also seeing people. So don't feel hesitant to use those resources because inclusion is not a privilege, it's a human right in a way, and we will all, in a way or other, profit from it. So that would be my little statement. And also I can recommend you, for example, the podcast of Berlinische Galerie is quite entertaining, also always interesting. And have a look at, if you're on Instagram, for example, at Redaktion Andererseits, which is a quite new news format by people with and without able-bodied people with disabilities who are really doing well-done journalism, because I feel we touched on inclusion here now regarding to the museum, but of course there are a lot of more stories to tell, so maybe listen to those communities and be curious about it.
Yeah, I would maybe recommend podcasts and blog posts by Mareice Kaiser. We will put her name into the show notes. She's a journalist, a woman from Berlin, who's, I think, the first of her family to have graduated from university, and who, is very open with her, alienness to cultural institutions, and who has done, sort of not internships, but she really exposed herself to these institutions and asked questions that she didn't dare to ask when she was a student or a younger person visiting these places. And her name is spelled with a C, Mareice with a C, and
we'll put it in
she's really cool.
And
of course, you all have to come and see the new exhibition in Schloss Schönhausen from, I think it's April 29th on.
Nice.
One of my takeaways is, and I thought this was very interesting, the inclusiveness and diversity in to bring them into museums. Of course, this is an ongoing discussion, but I had this, sitting here, this idea, and you talked about the neighborhood, and there should be temporary museums where people can take over, sort of. This Dritte Raum thing is such a space maybe, but it's more like it's an in-between space. But I think now, it would be cool to have a group of neighbors we are the museum now for, I don't know, a week or something.
Next time you ask the people that go to pick up their castle to put what they have in their parcel into the vitrine.
The museum of purchases made this week.
It's more participatory, And I just, because we're in the recommendation phase now, I would love to recommend the show at the Haus der Kultur in der Welt, HKW, which opened yesterday, Global Fascisms. And I think that's a really on-spot. Was a great opening, great speeches.
Really good poster, too.
Yeah,
Nailed
and
the
it's
design.
very timely show. You should go and see it. It's a great museum, too.
Excellent. And we'll include links to everyone's work and everything we referenced, as long as I remember to type them all in. And if you're listening and I forgot any, just bother me. I'll be happy to include them. There's a lot left to talk about and a lot less to think about. You'll just have to do that on your own time. Those of us who are here, we can talk about that now. But I wanted to also mention, as long as we're plugging podcasts, which I don't know how that became a thing, a great podcast made here in Berlin called Dig Where You Stand that examined the fact that we have a lot of ancestral remains and human corpses sticking around in museums, and that's sort of bizarre and weird and tragic. So that is Dig Where You Stand is another great podcast to check out that was made here in town. All right. Thank you to all of my guests, Michael Soltau, Aram Batholl, Lilja-Ruben, Dr. Wenke Wegner. Yes, thank you all much. And to the audience here, a round of applause for yourselves. Thank you to my team from EAB, Manuel, Carolin, Lucas, Kati, to the EAB. Thank you for coming. This show is co-produced with Europäische Akademie Berlin's Europe Behind the Headline series with kind support of the Federal Foreign Office and EU. Once again, I'm Daniel Stern with Radio Spaetkauf. Have a nice day. Go to a museum if it's not a nice day.
D-O-O Spaetkauf. Berlin News in English.